Hello, everyone. This is Ted Check, Social Media Manager for the International Foundation for Protection Officers. I'm here with Tom Conley. He is the founder and CEO of the Conley Group. That is a security company out of Des Moines, Iowa. Tom, how are you doing today?
I am very, very well. How are you, Ted?
Doing great, Tom. Doing great.
Fantastic.
Now, you and I talked a little bit on email, and I've been wanting to do a Zoom call with you for some time now. You are a past board member, or you are currently a board member, and you're a past president of the board, or chair of the board, I should say. And also, like I said, you run your own company, and you have for quite some time. You also have a background in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And so you suggested, you said, hey, Ted, why don't we talk about, obviously, the biggest news of the year, biggest news of, I don't know what, the pandemic, but how the security company has dealt with it, has been influenced by it, shaped by it, how it has reacted to it. So, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as you said. So yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. Well, as you appropriately stated, 2020 has been a year unlike no other that we can remember in our lifetime. And there's a couple of events that have occurred that have exponentially challenged security in new ways. Of course, we had the COVID virus that came from China, and that we didn't know a lot about early on. And then we went through a pretty significant lockdown, and then things started to ease up a bit. But then we also had these riots and the protests, the criminal acts, all that stuff sort of occurring at the end of May. So we were kind of just getting out of the lockdown, and then all this other stuff happened also. So really, we had two pretty significant challenges in 2020 that we had to really re-engineer a bit to meet the challenges. Because both of those events, both separately and cumulatively, put a significant stress on our assets. So we were faced with a challenge of how to do this much larger job with not a lot more people. And so that's kind of where we've been in 2020.
Right.
The riots, I guess, are over, except for Portland. But
right, I've heard there's a new autonomous zone that just started up. Am I right?
Yep.
Did I read the headline right on that?
You did. You did. And so and then of course, we're in a pretty significant lockdown in some states now, but the COVID numbers are reported as up. So we've kind of got that old trend, if you will, from the spring back that we're dealing with now.
Yeah, and I noticed a lot of things, just as the social media manager for the IFPO. At first, when the virus first kind of took hold here, when they shut everything down, there were parts of the country like Las Vegas, like Nashville, like Orlando, that rely on tourism. That all shut down, and so the security officers who found employment in those areas were out of work. But conversely, as businesses boarded up, they found that they needed protection from looting. Because they weren't in their stores or businesses. So and those, I guess, who didn't board up, or even those who did, they needed that protection. And so I started seeing advertisements for, hey, we need 1,000 officers here. We need 1,500 there. So, it was kind of a seesaw thing, depending on where you were in the country. And then the other thing I noticed, I was talking to a guy here I'm in South Central Pennsylvania. He owns a small security company. And he said to me, I never imagined that I'd have to buy riot gear. But one of his clients, who is in a downtown area, asked him to do it, fearing that there would be riots in that particular downtown area. Now, luckily there weren't, but he proactively bought the gear, and now he's got it if he needs it at any point in time.
Well, and I think you hit on a really, really critical point, which is that security has to be ready for the unexpected and then be able to spin up and deal with that effectively in a way where you're not um, spending too much money. Um, After 45 years, one of the things I've seen is people want to spend no money on security, but then when something happens, they react and
Oh
the
yeah.
pendulum goes the other way. And there's a lot of opportunity to prey on those people's emotions and bilk them out of a lot of money. And we simply don't do that. We try to have that pendulum in the middle at all times. So um, sort of the basis of security is risk management. You can do three things with risk. You can mitigate it, insure it, some of it, and then you have to accept that which you cannot insure or is not worth mitigating. In 45 years, the constant I've seen is organizations over accept and under mitigate risk. And so um, many of these programs did not have adequate assets on site before this hit. And then when these significant problems started coming in, they were just overwhelmed because they didn't have the basic risk management covered. Now they were being asked to do things that they simply weren't prepared for and couldn't do very well. So it really put a focus on not only having an adequate baseline security program, but also having people who can help you as conditions on the ground change. And your friend whose client wanted armor is a perfect example. Maybe they should have gotten armor, and maybe they shouldn't. But that's a natural Maslow reaction, if you will, to be able to protect yourself. So it goes from we're not going to invest a blank check to solve the problem. And so as security executives, part of my ethical and moral decision making is that we have to try to talk people out of those decisions where they're going to waste their money and it doesn't move the needle on risk. And that's it. I believe decisions not only have to be legal, but also moral and ethical. 2 out of the 3 don't cut it. Have to have all 3. So sometimes we have to tell our clients, if you want to do this, you're my new favorite person today, but I recommend that you not do it. We will if you really want us to, but it doesn't move the risk mitigation needle. And
Well, that's
so
unusual that you
yeah,
would
you have to kind of look at it quantitatively. And an adequate security program is sort of like an X, and it's a nexus point where the risks are adequately mitigated, but yet you're not spending a penny more than you have to on your security program. So that's what I mean by adequate. There's that balance between expenditures and risk mitigation.
Gotcha. And you talked about responding to things in this pandemic, that security officers responding to things that maybe they never imagined that they would. And you've got a great program because you require everybody who works for you to be to achieve the Certified Protection Officer certification through the IFPO, which I think is fantastic. And so they've got that bedrock, they've got that foundation, which they can then build on. And so I'm sure they put that to good use and are continuing to do so. And that kind of brings up another point of what we've seen even before the pandemic. We saw the number of security officers rising here in the country, I would guess around the world, and the number of police officers decreasing. And we're seeing the role of security officers expanding to kind of a para law enforcement, if you will, role. What do you think about all that?
Well, I think your observations are right on. The result of the riots that started in Minneapolis had a chilling effect on law enforcement. Law enforcement is the line between chaos and order in society. And I was so disappointed to see so many political leaders not supporting their law enforcement. I was appalled, frankly. The political leaders have to support the police. Police are not systemically racist. They don't get up every day and say, God, I hope I can go out and kill somebody today.
Right.
In fact, if you look at saves, they do far more of that than is reported. So nonetheless, their retirements are way up. People have quit, done other things,
Absolutely. I've
and
seen that.
recruitment is down. So that's a real bad combination. The thing is, those factors don't change the demand for services. So there's still a demand for public safety services. But I would advocate at times a lack of assets to be able to meet that demand. And that's where private security can come in to be a force multiplier for law enforcement and at zero cost to the taxpayer. The thing is that law enforcement and private security have a lot of overlapping duties, but they have separate roles and responsibilities. So what we have done is tried to step up and help law enforcement while not stepping over that line of playing policeman.
Right.
And in fact, I tell chiefs and sheriffs, we won't play policeman if you don't try to play security expert. So
right.
Little tongue in cheek there, but we have highly robust partnerships. And what makes that work is that we stay in our lane. If we see a policeman with problems, we'll always stop and help. If we run across an accident on the freeway, we'll always stop and help. But at no time is that our accident scene. It's the jurisdiction's accident scene, and we're simply stopping and rendering assistance because it's the right thing to do for others. So even further, we have a policing function, but we're not police. Okay. Police have a securing function primarily through crime prevention, but they're not security professionals. So we have to balance sort of the fact that we have a policing function, but we're not police, and stay in our lane. And if we ever don't, then our relationships will start going south in a big hurry and with good reason.
Gotcha. And Tom, I kind of want to. It's a related idea, and I think you were privy to this. There was an email discussion about the term first responder, and we had some people, some security experts that said no, security officers are not first responders, and we had other people that said that yes, they are. In fact, I think to me it boils down to the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. So I believe it's Homeland Security has a definition, and security officers don't fall under that definition. And I approach it from more of a practical standpoint, and thinking that, well, if they're first, then they are the first responder. And a lot of security officers have, like, say it's somebody who is, say, suffering a heart attack. And if they're the first one there, they have, a lot of them have CPR and first aid training. Say it's an individual who's wanted. A lot of security officers have a force continuum that they train, and so they have the ability to apprehend or detain, not necessarily arrest. So why not call them first responders? I guess I don't know. What are your thoughts?
The National Incident Management System, which is under FEMA, is the playbook under which all emergencies, disasters are handled nationwide. And so if Homeland Security says that, they haven't read the NIMS guidance, because the NIMS guidance is very, very clear about first responders and not first responders. We were the first NIMS compliant private security agency in the United States in 2007. We didn't have to have that, but we did it so that we could operate fluidly with our public safety partners in a joint response to an emergency or disaster. Security officers are not many times the first responders, but they're the only initial responders. And under NIMS protocol, that security officer is the incident commander until relieved by somebody else. So the reason for that is security people are often on site when an incident occurs, where public safety assets have to be there. So I think what we do is make a distinction between the first public safety responder and the first responder. And they're two very, very, very different things.
Sure.
So we're not public safety responders, but we're absolutely positively first responders. We're a little different in that we have emergency vehicle permits, so we can run red, blue lights and sirens.
Oh, wow.
Have the same authority that any other emergency, but we can exceed the speed limit, go through traffic sign signals for emergency
People have to
medical
pull over
situations.
for you and stuff like that?
They do have to.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, we have authorized emergency vehicles. So I don't know of any other security company that has those, but our cars look like sheriff's cars in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And we have direct two-way radio communications with law enforcement. We were issued that by the state of Iowa a number of years ago, but that allows us to talk directly to our public sector partners if we need to. So those privileges have been born out of a long period of trust that we won't abuse them. And if we ever do, those privileges will dry up in a big hurry. But because we have those, we're able to do things that legally that others can't. For instance, we had a hotel that was reportedly on fire. There are very, very few police assets available at that time. We responded on an emergency basis and got there first. Now there was no fire, but had there have been, we would have been there and been getting people out, follow the disaster emergency protocol to minimize damage to property, and of course save lives.
Got it.
So, I mean, what that really proves is that the right private security program can have traditional public safety privileges, but still stay in their lane. In a way, it's no different than a private ambulance service. We have rescue vehicle permits. Typically, that means response. Iowa law allows us to transport to a hospital or other medical facility.
Wow.
In case of emergency or disaster, meaning when no other, when an ambulance is not available, in a disaster, those assets dry up very, very quickly. So
Sure.
again, what we do is really act as a force multiplier for public safety and ultimately the taxpayer at zero cost to the taxpayer. So I would advocate that the right type of security program is a significant contributor to a safer community.
I would agree. Now, do you see, Tom, the future, do you see more security companies kind of using you as a model or kind of moving in that direction of let's have better trained officers. Let's try to really establish a rapport with local law enforcement instead of being at odds with them. All of those things that you have fostered over the years. Do you kind of see that happening elsewhere?
Not we're not there yet, and not anywhere close. The thing I haven't mentioned is that we also have a robust intelligence exchange with law enforcement. And we're members of, InfraGard, RIS, which is Regional Information Sharing System, Homeland Security Information Network. Those are all free things, but require vetting in order to be on them. And so we also have good partnerships with not only the intelligence folks, but also the Homeland Security liaisons, such as the personnel security advisor that each state has. And that exchange, that two-way exchange of intelligence, again, 1 + 1 = 5, because it really helps everybody. They can do things that we can't do. We can do things that they can't do, but together we can do a lot. And at its core, what we do a lot of is protecting critical infrastructure and key resource organizations, which are 85% owned nationally by the private sector, such as power companies, gas companies, that kind of thing. So partnership can work. Organizations still want minimum wage guards. I'm appalled at that. Really, most security programs are 1950s style night watchman programmed with a cleaned up title and uniforms.
Right.
And rhetorically, the question is, have the threats changed since the 1950s? So there's a wider gap between the capabilities of a common security officer and those that are needed to really help in an emergency and to prevent emergencies. One of the problems with public-private partnerships is most security organizations don't bring anything to the table. In order to be a partner, it can't be me.
Sure.
It has to be us. Yeah. I mean, it has to be relationship, and relationships are always two-way, meaningful, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So everything's done legally, above board. Nobody's civil rights are violated, but we share, what we can when we need to, and it only helps us protect the public while we're at the private sites that we secure, as well as going to and from those sites. Our patrol cars are out, so it does, if there's an all points bulletin for an Amber Alert, each one of our patrol officers is going to be on the lookout for that vehicle. And so if we see it, then we're going to call law enforcement, follow it, so law enforcement can make the stop, because we're not the police. But we can contribute in ways that are meaningful by, in that case, observing, and reporting, and then being a witness in court.
Yeah. So, Tom, something that you mentioned to me in another conversation was that, what the future holds, and that there will always be a need for humans, when you're looking at humans versus machines. There's certain things that machines will never ever be able to do, but they can replace some things. So we've seen the rise in the rise of the robots, if you will. There are security robots out there. Sometimes they take a trip down the stairs and wind up in a fountain, but
only if their name is Steve.
Right. So but yeah, I think that we're going to see more of that. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about how there's always going to be a need for a well-trained, highly skilled security officer.
One of the core problems is there's very little consequences for failure. An example is the Walmart shooting in El Paso. So there's 3 different types of things that security protects: people, property, and information. In terms of information, Walmart falls under federal laws like Sarbanes-Oxley, so that if they don't have financial integrity or have data breaches, their executives can literally go to jail. They have lost control people for their property, for their merchandise, but they had nobody there to protect their employees and guests, which was the problem. Had they had one armed security officer or off-duty police officer there, that would have been prevented, because the bad guy came in and had a little lunch to scope out before he then came back with rifles. So I believe that whole thing would have been averted. So Walmart, in my view, cared about their property and their information, but not people. But yet they'll tell you that people are the most important asset. So there's this, the problem is there's no federal law, state law that says your executives can go to jail if you have people killed or harmed due to a security failure. That's a real problem. Because it's not a mandate, people roll the dice, they overaccept, they under mitigate risk. And if bad things happen, they just hope they have insurance for it. Of course, the problem with that is that there's no insurance for gross negligence. And I know at Security 500 conference last November, meaning a year ago, an attorney talked and he said the average jury award for a death due to security negligence is between 50 and $60 million. So, so organizations just roll the dice that bad things won't happen. Unfortunately, because most security programs really don't show value, they don't get funded. So instead of reporting to a C-level person, they report to an HR person or the maintenance person. And so it's sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy of sickness. If you don't have any metrics and can't demonstrate value, you're not going to get funded. And you can't get funded, most times on the promise that you'll be able to produce that after you haven't. So that's why we really work with executives and produce metrics, because we can prove our value. And frankly, who would spend a penny on security unless that security control measure brought them back that penny and more? Right. So it's a return on investment issue. In terms of robots, I call them land drones. I'm sure that the people who make them don't appreciate that. There are places for them, such as a data center. A mall is not a place for them. So the problem is that they're misused. And the reason people buy them is because they're not out back smoking. They don't run away with their girlfriend. They don't, they're actually at work, and so, and on top of that, from a business perspective, anything hardware is depreciable. So fundamentally, you don't pay any taxes on that because it's all depreciated out. There's no depreciation schedule for labor. So people are really adverse to labor, meaning security people. So I think your question really about the future is that you're going to have smart security professionals, fewer of them, but more quality, integrated with electronics to help adequately secure facilities, and then have a response mechanism, should there be an emergency or disaster where people need to, respond for additional support. So I see the traditional minimum wage guard going away. In many cases, they're actually worse than worthless because they actually eat up companies' assets and bring no value. I remember the TikTok video of the gal who was on the night shift. She was a security guard, and she, did silly things with TikTok and broadcast live. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, first of all, the bad guys know where security is if they're watching. Mm-hmm. Secondly, if you're going around checking your smartphone, it's the patrolling equivalent of distracted driving. So you're not going to hear, smell, look. You're not going to be attuned to all those things that are potential perils because your face is buried in your smartphone instead of doing the job. And it's also a risk for the security officer because somebody's waiting to jump out and hit them with a hammer, and they don't take preventative measures, then their safety is at peril too.
Right, they're totally unaware.
Totally unaware.
Tom, you mentioned the minimum wage officer, and I can remember back in the early 90s, I worked as a security officer making $6 an hour. And
Mhm.
luckily I had a place to stay, but there were some guys that were just totally out on their own, and they'd have to pull like 80-hour weeks just to make rent. Uh, are you are we going to see an increase in wages, along with the need for a more skilled security officer?
Well, I think we will. But what companies do, if they have to pay too much for securities, they just take it in-house.
Hmm.
So the reason organizations pay for the traditional security guards is, for instance, they put them at a desk to greet people, and that's cheaper than hire receptionists for. And they believe they can offload some of their liability. When they actually have to pay for a professional security officer, then I suspect many of them will take security in-house because it's cheaper. I don't think that's probably the best idea. I think the best idea is to partner with a company that has an in-house feel, but has contract assets. For instance, most companies aren't going to have a security professional to help them through tough things like, fraud, workplace violence, all those threats. So when you get a professional security company, you not only get a professional security officer on site, but you also get that help that a company brings you. Um, and it, saves them, security professional comes out and works with them. It saves them, 120,000 a year plus benefits for a proprietary security director. But, certainly a lot of those basic functions will be transferred in-house, and you'll see a shrink, I think, in the number of security people, but I think you'll see a dramatic increase in the number of quality security professionals. And really, that's what we need.
I would agree. I would agree totally. So Tom, we talked about some of the challenges with COVID, which I guess we could say is the bad and the ugly. What about the good? What have we seen that's well, I mean, we're not totally through it yet, but so far, what good can we derive that out of COVID that relates to the security industry?
Well, I guess just to back up a minute, Ted, if I could,
Sure, yeah.
the virus came out of Wuhan, China. That's why some people call it the China virus.
Right.
But it did come out of there, and it was transferred. This particular strain was transferred from the United States to Wuhan in about 2003, when the United States didn't want that stuff here anymore. Um, the virus is a man-made virus, and you can tell that because it hasn't changed, mutated, those kind of things. And
Right, right.
with a natural virus like the AIDS virus, in anything else, you'll see a mutation and a change in its DNA structure over time. We haven't seen that with this virus. Now, the good news is when we get a vaccine for it, which is very, very soon now, since the initial one was approved already, um, that vaccine is going to be available to treat the virus in its present state. So by not changing its fundamental DNA structure, we can actually fight it with more pinpoint accuracy.
That is good.
The problem is that a virus is not something that's curable. A bacterial infection is. So we treat that with antibiotics. We want the infection to go away. A virus, you can't treat it and make it go away. It's there. But so what you're really treating is the nature of how the virus attacks the human body and making it a much lower impact virus. The problem is that a virus can and does affect the immune system, so then it causes a bacterial infection. And I suspect a lot of people die from that bacterial infections.
Ah, okay.
Viruses typically are not as bad as a bacterial infection, but you also really can't get rid of them. It's important to understand the origins. Early on, we didn't know a lot about the virus. We didn't know about its lethality. It's how easy it was spread, that kind of thing. We've since learned that lockdowns are not a good idea. Sweden didn't lock down, neither did the state of South Dakota, and they have actually better statistics on COVID than many of the areas that lock down really, really tight. So just personally, I'm not a fan of lockdowns or keeping kids out of school. How that has manifested itself into the security world is parents were stuck at home.
Right.
Parents were stuck without money because they couldn't go to work because their kids were at home this spring. And so what we saw was a lot more domestics, assaults, overdoses, all those things that come from a pressurized environment. The good news, and you asked about the good news, is we've learned to be better, and we've learned how to deal with people in a better way, so that hopefully we can solve some of those problems a little more successfully than having people go to jail. You know, somebody's drunk out in the parking lot, we de-escalate and help them get back to their apartment even when they want to fight you. So that also is very, very problematic with the issue that we're aware of with less police. Again, the demand for services has increased while the supply of assets has decreased. And so we can take a drunk person, we can detain them, but we're going to wait 3 hours some nights for a police car. And that in no way is their fault. There's just too many calls for services due to that demand and higher priority calls. So we did give our officers an increased level of skills up front. They already get de-escalation. They have police academy training on top of the IFPO certifications that you mentioned and that are absolutely extremely valuable. But we gave them more training on top of that, not only for the health of people they deal with, but also for their emotional health. You know, when these lockdowns came about in March, public health officials were doing exactly what they thought was the right thing to do. The problem was, while health concerns were being looked at, there was no consideration given to people's emotional health or spiritual health. And that's what I think we're going to see long-term problems. That's really going to be the ugly, if you will. You know, the cure can't be worse than the disease, and it certainly is because of that, you know, that fallout. We're also concerned with our own security officers, and we are essential workers also. So with respect to the DHS, we are essential workers, and so, you know, back to the first responder issue.
And I got to say, Tom, I'm not sure that I'd have to kind of couch that. I'm not 100% positive that it was the Department of Homeland Security. There's a definition out there somewhere. It's a federal definition. I'm just not sure precisely which department it is.
Yeah, no, and you know, there's different departments that have different definitions on terrorism, and but the sad fact is that security people, in large measure, do not have the capabilities to be of help to public safety. So if a traditional guard with no capabilities calls and reports, you know, a fire, ammonia spill, whatever it is, if they don't understand the NIMS protocol, they're not trained, and they're not able to help, then public safety is going to get there and say, you know, go stand over there and we'll let you know if we need anything, because they don't, you know, they don't know what to do. If you don't know what to do, you can't help. And so that becomes the real problem, is you're really a placeholder and an oxygen consumer versus an active part of the solution. And that's what training does. You know, the IFPO does a great job with that. But I think part of the good is that we have learned how to care for each other in a
Right,
better way.
right.
And um, there's a lot of lessons learned in life, but not a lot of lessons applied. There's an old saying that if we've learned anything from history, it's that we don't learn much from history. So,
Yeah,
so it's really important with us to take some of those lessons learned and apply them, share them, and inculcate them into organizations so our people are going to be better off even after this pandemic is over.
right. And you talk about developing a culture where you care about each other, and I know you've told me that about your group, and I'm a journalist when I'm not working for the IFPO, and so we've been in our homes. We've been out of our office and in our homes since mid-March. But we check on each other. Hey, how you doing? How you holding up? Things like that. We have a Zoom call every morning that we all get together on. So yeah, I think you're right. That there's a level of care that has kind of come forth from all this. This kind of a silver lining in it all.
Yeah, we have to be our brother and sister's keepers. I mean that's we have to look out for one another. And if there's one thing that gets people through tough times, it's being able to have others there for you. There's that. I think it's I don't know, Rockefeller Square, but somewhere where there's that figure holding up the world, right?
Oh, sure, Atlas.
Yeah, Atlas holding up the world. Well, you have another person come in, and that weight is automatically cut in half.
Right,
Automatically.
right.
So if you have, I learned this through my nearly 30 years in the military too, with veterans and suicides and the challenges that some of our brothers and sisters, face. So that's why I was disappointed that there was no mental health consideration / component when these lockdowns started. It's just kind of go lockdown and don't go out unless you need to. Okay, well, now what? Now what?
Right.
And socialization with school children, that's horrendous not having them in school, because it's not only a learning problem, it's the socialization and learning how to be with others and have them sort of prop you up, you prop them up. So
Right.
nobody wants to be banished, and we've sort of got this societal banishment going on in some states. And again, I personally don't agree with it. Yeah, we have to, we have to be relatively safe by trying to physical distance and do those right things. But I think lockdowns, don't really move the needle for COVID. And I think we're going to see long-term heavy problematic issues from mental illness for this, substance abuse,
Mm.
and all the really ugly stuff that goes with it. So, that's my concern.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you so much for your time. I think we covered a lot here, and I would encourage anybody out there that has a security company or is considering establishing one, to look to you for guidance, to listen to this, because there's a lot of information that we covered in this related to the security industry. But yeah, Tom, thanks again so much for for all your time and everything that you do.
Well, Ted, and I very, very much appreciate it. It's about sharing. I'm willing to help anybody out. I know you are too. And thank you for all you do for the IFPO. Without you, sort of doing everything in a closet, and knowing that, being a young guy that you are,
Get out of here.
having the assets that you have and the knowledge you have has made a tremendous difference to IFPO's message that's so critical to get out. So boy, I just appreciate you and your ongoing help.
Oh, thanks, Tom. I plan to keep going with it. Yeah. All right. And we'll have to have another conversation. This one was so great. We'll have to do another one down the line, for sure.
Happy to help at any time.
Thank you, Tom.